David, is it fair to say you have lived a life of two lives?
Probably more than that, but yeah, I think it's fair to say that. Yeah.
Yeah, when do you feel like that, I guess, second, third iteration started?
Look, it wasn't overnight. I know
No.
that for sure. But it wasn't really until 2015 that I found myself at the lowest point in my life. Now, I'd had a bit of a crap life before that. But 2015, that was when I was at the lowest point in my life ever. I'd lost contact with everybody. I was street homeless, alcohol, drugs, but I was doing those anyway. And I kind of, I don't want to say I had an epiphany. I had a choice. And that choice was whether to live or die. And I chose to live, but I didn't want to live the life I was leading. And I thought, I need to sort my life out. And the only way that I can do that is from the platform of prison, believe it or not. It sounds quite irrational now I say it, but back then it wasn't irrational at all. And as it was the last time I'd ever been to prison again, and I sort of turned my life around after that, it's probably the best decision I ever made as well.
David, I read on a blog that you had written that prison had almost become like a safety, almost like a way of life, which you were familiar with. You knew exactly what you'd be doing.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a weird concept. Can you explain how we get to the point, and what does prison provide, which was a point of comfort for you?
Well, for a start, prison provides security. I know that's funny to say, but it does. It provides security. Prison walls don't just keep people in; they keep people out as well. But it kind of it creeps up on you, if you like. Not for everybody. Some people fight against it. You see in the press that people will continually fight against the system because they don't want to be sucked into the system. And in a way, I suppose you become so used to things that you become embedded in it. And out in society, I didn't like life outside because I was always surviving life. In jail, I felt I could live life. Probably not everyone's idea of what a good life would be, but I had a pretty good life. Don't get me wrong, it weren't all rainbows and cocktails, but it wasn't bad. It wasn't a bad life. And the fact that I'm sitting here today and obviously got through it, hopefully validates that.
So I know you've told your story a couple of times, different interviews, but I just want to backtrack a little bit. We both grew up in the same part, the same neck of the woods, Kent.
Yep.
What was your teen years like?
No, my teen years weren't very good. I was excluded from school at 14, and then at 15, I received my first custodial sentence, which was 4 months detention centre. Short, sharp shock, as they like to call it back then. And you know what? After a week, I might have stopped, but it went on for 3 weeks, 3 months and 3 weeks. So after a week, I got used to it. And I really started to enjoy detention centre. The detention centre was so rigidly structured. Everything you'd done was timed. So you had this amount of time to do that, that amount of time to do that. And it was all about discipline and marching. I mean, I learned how to sew in detention centre. I learned how to fold my clothes in a certain way, bed packs that we used to have to do. And it's all about being neat and tidy. And those are things that I was able to carry on throughout my life, really. But yeah, so that, and then after I spent my 16th birthday in Blantyre House, and then Blantyre House closed down, and a few of us got transferred to HMDC Eastwood Park up in Bristol, which is now a women's prison. Some of them got sent to HMP Send, which is now a women's prison. And some of them got sent to HMPDC Haslar, which is now, well, it was an immigration removal centre, but I think that closed down now. But then after Eastwood Park, that didn't really have an effect on me, as I say. And then I found myself in a couple of times in youth custody centres.
David, I'm not one for kind of sensationalising crime and kind of using clickbait and that type of stuff. But another thing I read was you committed a robbery to get yourself back into a prison. What type of crime was it that you were getting yourself involved in the early days?
Well, in the early days, it was kind of acquisitive crimes, is what they call it. So, sort of antisocial behaviour, if you like, it'd be known as now. So those are the types of things. But then with being excluded from school, all my mates were either in school, or the ones that weren't were like me, been excluded, or I had older friends that weren't going to school. So although I was already in, if you like, into criminality, it was low level crime, but the more I hung about with these others, the more serious the crimes began. I found myself doing my first armed robbery at the age of 14. Although I was kind of there, I wasn't really involved, you know what I mean? I made up the numbers. But even then, it was still an incredible experience. I was someone at that age that was searching for an identity, searching for something. That's with hindsight. I didn't know this at the time, obviously. I was lost. I was searching for an identity. I was searching for somewhere where I could fit in. I didn't fit in at home. I was the youngest of 6, and I didn't fit there. I didn't fit in school because I wasn't my siblings that I'm following through school, because everyone's comparing me to them. So really, as I say, I was really struggling for that identity. And then my mates, they loved what I did. They were patting me on the back. I fitted in. And look, that we hardly, there was a few of us that were younger, and we hardly earned any money at all. But it wasn't about that. It was about the camaraderie. It was about that togetherness. It was about the celebrations afterwards. Not so much, not all the time, because probably 9 times out of 10 things would go wrong, and they wouldn't end up as you'd want them to. But now and again, you'd get a good job, you'd do a good tickle, and you earn a bit of money. But as I say, we only got pennies really for kind of the money that was involved, but it wasn't about the money.
I'm guessing from what you're saying, it sounds like it almost provided some tribalism, sense of belonging.
We all want to belong, don't we?
Yeah.
We all want to belong, and sometimes we end up belonging to the wrong types of groups. And it's really, in a way, what's gone wrong before that as to why we've ended up on that group. If things were different, the chances are I wouldn't have ended up in that group. If my school had taken a little bit more of a step back and tried to understand me a little bit better, although we didn't know as much then as we do now, and that's why I get angry now, because it's like, well, look, I can excuse what happened to me in school because we didn't know anything, but you know everything now. So why are we still excluding the children from school and setting them up to fail? Why are we sort of misdiagnosing children and not seeing them for who they are and what potential they can be? Do you know what I mean? It's there's so much neurodivergence in the education system and in the criminal justice system that isn't getting picked up, and those are the reasons why we have an education system that's failing children, and we have a criminal justice system that's failing not just victims in society, but also obviously the people that are going through the criminal justice system.
Mm-hmm. So the first time, your first experience going to a detention centre or prison was 2000?
No, my first time going away, detention centre, was 1985.
1985?
1985. I was excluded from school in 1984.
Right.
I'm 55 now, so I know I don't look it, thank you. My teeth might, but yeah, so that was 1984.
Okay. How many different places have you stayed in?
Well, back then, before detention centre, it was I was placed into the remand of the local authority, so it was a children's home, which began with a secure unit before being moved on to the main house. Then it was detention centre twice. Then it was youth custody, and that youth custody journey involved a prison as well, HMP Canterbury. Back then, that was 1987. I was in there. Back then, they hadn't been there more than once, but they had a landing called YP landing, which is Young Person's Landing. And literally 30 cells were for people under the age of 21, and the rest of the prison was men over the age of 21. And that was a bit of an eye-opener for me. But again, I kind of had the experience of detention centre and youth custody before prison, so that set me up ready, I suppose.
When it comes to prison, I've watched a lot of like US documentaries, and it's nuts to say the least over there. They got this bizarre system of almost like segregation amongst the inmates. There's almost like this unwritten rule in terms of religion, ethnicity. Did you experience any of that kind of bizarre tribalism?
Not to that level. You kind of, in jail, you kind of magnate to your own.
Yeah.
You kind of find your own tribe, if you like. And it's like anywhere really. You kind of, you want to be involved in your tribe. So yeah, there are different religious groups in prison. There are different ethnicities in prison. There are a number of different kind of groups in prison, if you like. And I suppose in a way it helps people, groups like that, because you're not ever going to group everybody together, which is a shame, because that way we'll probably celebrate differences rather than use them to attack each other. But yeah, it's what am I trying to say? It's a way of surviving. It's prison's very difficult on your own, and it's a lot easier if you're part of a group. Do you know what I mean? I think that's the best way to explain it. So yeah, it's not as kind of rampant, if you like, as it is in America. But yeah, we do have situations that do involve certain groups.
Yeah. So from this time, I guess it's like 25, 30 years, you are front and center when it comes to be able to speak with authority about how prisons help rehabilitate or don't rehabilitate.
I can only speak from my experience. I'm not an expert on the criminal justice system. I'm an expert on my journey through the criminal justice system, and that's what I try and do when I'm speaking to decision makers and policy makers. I use my experience because that's what I know. Of course, I have heard experience where I've supported other people and picked up things from them. And they're kind of lessons that I've picked up as well that I can use when I'm trying to influence change.
So what are some of those lessons you've learned?
Yeah, well, really for me, I suppose the biggest impact on the criminal justice system, the way I see it, is the impact of school exclusions. The last time I was in prison, which was 2017, that's when I was released, the Institute of Public Policy estimated that 62% of the prison population had been excluded from school at some point. So that's huge. When you look at the education system, it's only something like 0.01% of children get excluded from school each year, or permanently excluded from school each year. So it might seem something that's extremely rare in the education system, but when you look at it through the lens of the criminal justice system, as I say, 62% have been excluded from school. So school exclusions has a massive, massive impact. Once you're excluded from school, you feel as a child, or I, looking back, felt as if I was being socially excluded. Not just excluded from school, but excluded from everything. You feel like you failed, but you don't know what you failed. Do you know what I mean? As I say, I was 14, so it's very difficult to understand what was going on in my life at the time. I wish I knew then what I knew now, because I would have fought it and challenged it. Do you know what I mean? But I didn't. I was 14. I had a lot of issues going on. I had undiagnosed ADHD, which didn't come out until later on in life. So I couldn't control me. I didn't know who I was. I didn't have an identity, obviously, unless I was in prison. And being a prisoner was probably the best identity that I had I've been a father and a grandfather. And until I sorted my life out, I wasn't very good at those either.
Yeah, so at what point did you become a father?
I became a father in 1991. And I previously the year before, the previous year, I'd got married. And I was hoping to settle down and sort my life out and get things right. And I thought that was the way forward. But it wasn't. I made a mistake, really. It's nothing to do with the person I married. It wasn't her fault at all. This was all down to me. And I got married in the April 1990, and my mum died in the October. She was 59, and that really did. Well, it ruined me, if you like. I wouldn't wish losing anyone's mum. Losing I wouldn't wish losing their mum on anyone. Do you know what I mean? It's it really. I mean, I can kind of talk about it a lot easier now, but it's only really been the last few years that I've been able to talk about that side of things a lot easier without getting emotional. I kind of speak about it from a third person, if you like. And then my daughter, my firstborn, was born in the July the following year, so kind of 9 months after my mum died. And my mum died with of a heart attack. My daughter was born with a heart murmur, and she actually looks like me. It's really bizarre. But I couldn't hold the relationship down. I couldn't understand who I was before my mum died. So afterwards was just, and then I just, well, yeah.
What's your personal experience of being in prison before having a daughter versus after? I imagine that's quite a heavy thing.
Well, I didn't go to jail until 2004. After my, wasn't to say I wasn't going to court, getting in trouble, getting community services, things like that, but jail, 2004. So I had a massive gap from sort of well, back end of 80s up until 2004, where I stayed out. I had a couple of things where I got done for non-payment of fines, refused to pay, done a few days here, a few days there, but nothing too serious. With my daughter, when she was born, she was 3 when myself and my wife broke up, and ended up losing contact. I could have done way much more, and I didn't. I mean, no worth beating myself. I can't change the past. You know what I mean? I wish I'd done more as a father back then, but I didn't, and I lost contact with my daughter. But funny enough, we regained contact again in 2009 when I was serving in HMP Wayland, and my daughter had been looking for me, and obviously I was in prison, so quite easy to find in the end. After she got in contact with a few family members, and we reconnected in prison. Prior to that, 2004, I had my middle son was born in 97. My youngest son was born in 2002. So they were both about when I went to prison again for the kind of the second chance, if you like. And that was extremely difficult. That I never forget Christmas 2004, and I was on, it's G-Wing now, it's D-Wing back then, in HMP Pentonville. And I made a phone call to my son on Christmas Day, and I couldn't finish it. I had to go and bang myself back up again because I was so upset. The thing was, that's another thing where I suppose the sliding doors, why didn't I use that for motivation to change my life? Do you know what I mean? But even at that point, back in 2004, I was still searching for my identity, if you like. I'd been working, had jobs. I was a father. I wasn't a grandfather at that point. I wasn't a grandfather until 2000. God, I better get this right. 2010. I think I got that right. But yeah, because she was pregnant when she came up to see me in 2009, so I did get that right. But then I had a better connection with my kids when I was in prison because I saw them regularly. Do you know? And they'd come up and see me, and brilliant. I mean, the boys' mum's fantastic for that, for making sure that they stayed in contact with me, sort of thing. Me and the boys' mum had split up at that point. But yeah, because they were coming up to see me regularly, it wasn't that difficult. Do you know what I mean? It really wasn't that difficult.
What was your turning point? Was it a series of events? Was it a one-off event? What was the point where you decided, okay,
215. It was 215 when I was street homeless. I was sleeping in the doorway of a church, and I've had enough. I've just had enough of this life. And I didn't know, as I say, I was contemplating to take my own life. I never did, obviously, at that point. Yeah, that really was the time where I thought, right. And it wasn't until a couple of weeks later that I kind of realised that I need to go back to prison. Do you know what I mean? I was kind of with these two mates, Brian and Ollie, and I want to know who they are. I was on the streets with those for a while, and then I met someone in a day centre. We got talking. He sold drugs, and I started helping him selling the drugs, and that was with him one night where I just sat there and I just thought, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. And it kind of come to me that what I needed to do, and that was to get myself back to prison. I couldn't go back to prison for weeks. I needed a long time. I had decided, I told you it was irrational at the time, but I had decided that 5 years would be enough for me. And I needed to do a crime that was going to give me that time. I couldn't go in and nick a can of beer because I would have got a slap on the wrist. So I needed to do something serious, and I selected a shop, and I ended up doing a knife point robbery on the shop, and kind of made myself available to be caught, if you like.
Right. In terms of, so that's your, I guess, your turning point for beginning of it. It's very evident from the way you speak. You're very open about your mental health.
Yep.
And it's clear that you've worked on certain aspects to get yourself to this point where you're at now. Did you ever reach out to any services? Were there any services available in prison, or was it all 100% on you? Changing?
No, I have done. I mean, back in 2008 was when I was in prison. I disclosed that I'd been sexually abused to a counsellor. And there's a reason for that. It's a long story, but I ended up in 2008 disclosing about child abuse that happened to me as a child. And I worked on that with a counsellor in prison, and that was brilliant. But that wasn't the only thing. If that it would have been great if that had happened in a vacuum, and I sorted that out, and that was me done. I didn't need any more help. So in jail, going back to 2005, I was in HMP Blunderston on a sentence, and I'd been approached by one of the officers, Dave Banks, I'll never forget him, and he said about coming up to get involved with this new reading scheme thing called Toe by Toe by a charity called Shannon Trust. And he was like, yeah, and I'll get involved in that. I'll be honest with you, I was getting involved in it because I wanted to improve my own sort of reputation, if you like, and hopefully get my DCAT, which is an open prison. And so a lower security prison. And to get into them, you have to do things that are good in the prison so that you look good. You know what I mean? So that was why I'd done it at first. I won't lie. But it was very soon after doing it, when I was getting involved with the learners, that how much of an impact it was having on me. Because I thought my story was quite unique. And I started speaking to, obviously, people that I was mentoring, and found out from them that kind of life stories was the same, really. They'd been abused, excluded from school, all those sort of things. Their lives were so similar. And off the back of becoming a Shannon Trust mentor, I then become a listener for the Samaritans. And then on another sense, so that was that time. And every time I've gone back to prison, I've picked those roles up. And then in 2009 in Wayland, I was an education mentor. I became an education mentor. And I've done a couple of qualifications. I've done ALS, which is Assisted Learning Support, City and Guilds Level 2. And then I've done PETALS, which is Preparing to Teach in the Lifelong Learning Sector. And that's Level 3 with City and Guilds. Because I was really interested in kind of teaching, but people in prison. I weren't interested in thinking about things outside. This was all about my progression in prison and what I could do in prison and what I could do for other people in prison. Because my peers become my tribe. They were my family, more so than what my family were. Do you know what I mean? So being able to do things for other people in prison gave me self-worth, gave me value. And obviously it gave me a better reputation in prison as well. But the benefits for me were just astronomical. And then in 2010, I received my diagnosis of ADHD. I wasn't in the right place mentally to kind of take that on board. It was just another label. I I just continued to self-medicate with alcohol and drugs, which I did most of my life. And then, as I say, it was that time in 2015 where kind of, well, I've got all of this information. I know that I can be a good person because of what I do in prison. So how can I take from what I do in prison outside? The person who I was in prison, why can't I be that person outside? And the thing with prison is I didn't have a mask. Out here I have to wear a mask. And Joe, I didn't. You kind of put up a front and you wear a mask. They're slightly different. Wearing a mask can be very detrimental to you as an individual because it is exhausting wearing a mask. Honestly, I still wear a mask quite a lot these days, and it's exhausting. But when you're putting up a front, it's a little bit easier. Do you know what I mean? It's just a little bit of fake confidence, if you like. Whereas masking, you're masking so much. Do you know what I mean? And it's and in jail, I didn't need to do that because we're all the same. Do you know what I mean? It's like by saying thank you and please, that made you stand out. Do you know? It's weird. It's a strange old environment, prison, but it was an environment I really enjoyed being in. And it was an environment that gave me a purpose and it gave me an identity in prison. All right, it was a mentor as a prisoner, but oh God, I can't explain how good I felt about myself doing those and helping people. And then coming to you, or you'll see someone that who can't read properly, and then you support them, and within no time at all, they're in education doing level 2 English. Do you know? It's such. Because what I found as well was that when it comes to education, it's not that people can't do it. They struggle because of what's gone on before, the way that other people have made them feel, the lack of support that they've been given, or not been given, should I say. The lack of understanding, being misunderstood, not being diagnosed, not being screened for anything. Adults just seeing behaviour as behaviour, when adults should be looking at behaviour as communication, because all behaviour is communication. Through someone's behaviour, they're screaming out at you, something's wrong.
Mm. I want to talk specifically about the work you did with the Samaritans. Yep. So what level were you working with? So I'm assuming it was prisoners.
Yeah.
So what type of stuff were you getting involved with suffering?
Well, basically, we'd received training from the Samaritans, and then every so often we'd be on call, depending on how many listeners there are. And that means that we're available 24/7, 365 days a year, even Christmas Day, New Year, whenever. We're always available to someone that's in crisis. And all someone needs to do is to, if they're behind their door, they get on their cell bell, which is that's a different debate there on how quickly officers answer that cell bell. But in an ideal world, this is how it should happen. Someone will get on, I need to speak to a listener, please. And then they come and get us out, and we're going to the listener suite, and we'll discuss how they're feeling and what their issues and problems are. And then in 2009, 2008, 2009, I was a reception orderly in a local prison, which is a receiving prison. So anyone that goes through the courts will go through a local prison. And I worked in reception there, and I worked as a listener in there as well. And I was kind of dealing with all types of people then.
Are there any particular cases that stand out in your mind? People you helped?
There are, but unfortunately, the two that really stick out are two that died in prison. They died by suicide. And those really, they're the ones that stick with me.
Hmm. In terms of prison, like I said, you're very big on self-responsibility, kind of self-education, and getting your routines in place. But what can they provide? We discussed off camera. We got this massive re-incarceration rate. We got the worst in Europe. Our prison size has doubled in the last 20, 30 years. What can prisons provide which they're not providing right now, or what can they get better at? On the mental health piece.
Well, they're good at locking people up. Let's put that one out there. There's a lot that prisons could do. But first and foremost, if we are serious about reforming the criminal justice system, we've got to reform the education system, because that's where the failure is happening. By the time someone's got to prison, it's never too late, but it's too late. Do you know what I mean? We need to start intervening early so that we don't have to rely on the criminal justice system to do the things that it can't do, and that's rehabilitate people. However, for me, rehabilitation isn't a thing. It's not a destination. It's an attitude. It's a mindset. You've got to have that rehabilitative mindset. I believe that I've got the rehabilitative mindset now, because just because I chose to turn my life around doesn't mean to say I've been sprinkled with magic powder and everything's hunky-dory. Life still throws curveballs at you. Things still happen. Negative things still happen. And without that rehabilitative attitude, I could make the wrong decisions. But because I've got that attitude and that mindset, I make the right decisions. And that's why, well, I've been able to stay away from the criminal justice system for so long since my last release.
So let's play a little game here. So let's say you're on a 12-hour flight, and the person sat next to you is about to face a life sentence. They're going in tomorrow. What advice would you give them? They're facing 20, 25 years.
To be honest, I'd be the wrong person to speak to, would be my advice, because I've never done a life sentence. But what I could help them with is, I mean, when you've got a release date, you've got hope. If you haven't got a release date, you haven't got hope. And without hope, you've only got hopelessness. So it's like, I've never been, I suppose, yes, you're right, in 2015, I was at the lowest point in my life. And I contemplated taking my own life, but I didn't. So I suppose then, I suppose there. But yeah, I suppose I'd talk to them about, one of the worst things is keeping yourself to yourself. Because if you keep yourself locked away, if you keep yourself isolated, other people are going to be wondering why you're keeping yourself isolated. And they're not going to think it's something to do with mental health. They're going to think it's something to do with your crime. And they're going to be on you, and you're going to find that you're going to be more vulnerable by trying to keep yourself out of everyone's business. So really, the only way, I suppose the best way to explain how to do prison is just to see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. Do you know what I mean? That's the thing. I'm not really explaining this very well, am I?
No, I get your point.
Yeah, so yeah. If you said to me about someone going to prison, but someone with a life sentence, I can't imagine what they would need to know. If I'd done a life sentence, I would happily speak to someone looking at a life sentence. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But I wouldn't know what to say to someone. Mm-hmm. I really wouldn't know what to say to them. I could give them the advice of make sure you use your crab blanket, do this. Do you know what, all the basic stuff that someone would need to know that you kind of learn in prison from other people rather than from staff. But yeah, that would be my advice. Basically, how to get on in prison rather than that sentence.
How do you feel now when you see a homeless person in the streets? Because let's be honest, for most people, if you walk past a homeless person, they're not there.
No, exactly.
How do you
it's
feel
very easy for people to ignore the problems that are on our streets. It's very easy to people to be wearing blinkers. Now, I mean, I have a view of people who are homeless myself. I've been there. I understand it. I will sit down and talk to someone. But this isn't about virtue signalling. Do you know what I mean? So, see, I'm more someone that talks to the powers that be rather than people that are in my situation. Because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make the system fairer, more effective and just, so that whoever's going through the system will be treated a hell of a lot better than what everyone else that previously gone through the system has been. And we do that through awareness. We do that through using our lived experience in a way that we can influence those people that are making the decisions. Do you know what I mean? Mm. So it's like I don't often talk to people in my situation I talk to people in my situation that've got lived experience in my situation now, that kind of we feel like Sublan and people like that, who've been to prison, have turned their lives around. That's my tribe now, rather than people that are still in it. If that makes sense.
Mm. You mentioned a while back that even today you sometimes struggle with wearing a mask.
Yeah, no, I don't struggle wearing it. I wear it fine.
Yeah.
It's when I get home and take it off that it's just so exhausting.
What are those contexts where you feel like you have to wear a mask?
It's I don't want to say posh meetings, but posh meetings. You know what I mean? I've been to Parliament a few times, quite a few. In fact, I've been to prison 9 times, and I've been to the Houses of Commons now 10 times since my last release. So I've been to Parliament more times than I've been to prison. But as someone with my background, it's not easy to forget my background or forget where I come from. So when you're in those types of places, it's always, and of course with my ADHD as well, it's being in control of that whilst trying to fight off imposter syndrome and all things like that. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know if I've explained that extremely well, actually, about wearing a mask and it being exhausting. I think at the end, I think we all wear masks, don't we? To some extent. And it sounds like I'm being false or being fake by saying about wearing a mask. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
But it's like when you're travelling on the train, there's so much going on that no, I'm really not explaining this out. I'm so sorry, mate.
No, you're explaining it well. I hear you.
Yeah, it's how can you? It's very difficult to explain it. Do you know what I mean? It's like, well, why do you wear a mask? It's like, well, I don't want people to see the old me.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So I try to be this.
So do you struggle with if people hear about your story and your background? Let's say you're in Parliament.
No, not then. No, but I mean the situation. I'm kind of struggling here. Do you know what I mean? Not that I've got a mask on, but if I was wearing a mask, I probably would be giving you the right answers. Do you know? But because I'm not wearing a mask, I'm kind of. So in a way, it gives you that. It's like a character, another character. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
It's like there's Dave and David, where David is the confident, articulate, intelligent criminal justice reformer, whereas Dave is still that little boy that's hiding within him.
Mm.
And that's the part that I don't want people to see. That's because you can be vulnerable, and there are certain things that have gone on where I've struggled and to stay in meetings and things like that. I just wanted to get up and walk out, and it's kind of you protect. That's that. Do you know what I mean? That's when that mask is put on so you can protect yourself.
Do you think? Well, let's take the Parliament example. Do people speak to you like you're David Breakspear or you're an ex-prisoner?
No, do you know what? They don't. They speak to me as if I'm David.
Yeah,
they do. And I've got to be honest. In all the work I do across all the different sectors that I'm involved in, I get treated extremely, extremely well. No one has held my past against me. So I know what you're saying there. It's my own self-doubt that does it, rather than the way that people make me feel. But now, do you know what? Now we're speaking about it, I don't think I wear a mask as much these days as I did back in the day. I'm probably doing myself a disservice there, because I am a better person now. I really am. I'm miles away from the person that I used to be. So perhaps, yeah, I'm doing myself a disservice by saying I still wear a mask. I'm just a different person now, I suppose. Although that day still exists in me.
When you're at Parliament, did you meet any MPs?
Oh yeah, loads.
How did they receive your message and what you were talking about?
Well, look, I mean, they're always great at receiving messages and photo shoots and things like that, and standing next to your placard that you got up or whatever. They love all that because it's great for them. Some of them, I'll tell you what, one person who I really do have a lot of respect for, who's no longer an MP, and that's Robert Buckland, Sir Robert Buckland. When he was Justice Secretary, I can't say that I agreed with everything that he said or everything that he did. Then again, there's not many Justice Secretaries that I have. There isn't any. But with Robert Buckland, now from I mentioned about school exclusions having a big impact on the criminal justice system. Undiagnosed neurodiversity as well is a reason why we have so many school exclusions and why people end up in the, well, actually, no, it's not the undiagnosed, it's the lack of support and understanding that these children are not getting that's why they end up in the criminal justice system. The fact I had ADHD isn't why I ended up in the criminal justice system. The fact that ADHD was undiagnosed, misunderstood, probably not known about back then, let's be honest, is why I ended up in the criminal justice system. It's my ADHD was a symptom, not the cause. Yeah, if that makes sense. There's a big thing now around neurodiversity in the criminal justice system, and it's a massive positive impact that it's had, and that all began with Robert Buckland. I believe that one of his children's autistic, so he kind of understands neurodivergent conditions, and understood that he could see a lot of it in the criminal justice system, and that's why he set up the neurodiversity in the criminal justice system, a look into neurodiversity in the criminal justice system, and that was something that I was involved in with the charity Revolving Doors. We become part of the working group of this neurodiversity in the criminal justice system action plan, and that was an incredible piece of work that we got involved in. And because of that, every prison now has a neurodiversity support manager, and off the back of that, most prisons now have neurodiversity support champions. Neurodiversity champions. And that's not just people who are serving sentences, it's also people who work in prison as well. So neurodiversity is really people in prison, or people working in prison, and people around the criminal justice system are starting to understand now the impact that undiagnosed neurodiversity is having on the criminal justice system. And that, as I say, goes back to Robert Buckland. And I don't care whatever else he does in life. I will always hold him on put him on a pedestal for what he's done for neurodiversity in prisons, or in the criminal justice system, should I say.
Oh, it sounds like a good development.
It's huge.
Does your neurodivergency enter your life these days in a negative way, or have you learned to mitigate and manage it?
I've got a lot of coping skills now. I've got a lot of coping skills that I can tap into when I feel myself when I feel myself going whatever way. I've had a few incidences in public where I was seconds away from making the wrong decision, but made the right decision. And those types of things kind of validate and cement. So the next time it happens, you're even stronger. The next time it happens, you're stronger again. The next time, you just brush it off your shoulder. You know, and that's kind of what happens. So my mouth gets me in trouble quite a lot. But my ADHD, I've got that under as much control as I possibly need to have it under control, if I like. Because there's a part of my ADHD, or there's a part of the ADHD traits, which is justice sensitivity. Now, in the past, I always felt that people were doing me wrong, so I would rebel against that, and obviously that was where my justice sensitivity used to get me into trouble. Now, I use my justice sensitivity to fight for a fair and just and effective criminal justice system. So it's the same thing, and I've just reframed it, and rather than it be a negative in my life, it's now an extremely, extremely impactful positive.
Brilliant. Oh, that's great. In terms of what you're doing now, what does your day-to-day, week-to-week look like? What type of work are you getting
involved with? I'm all over
the
place, honestly. I'm all over the place. I'm a lived experience. So I'm a non-executive director for two organisations, Starting Step up in Scotland and New Beginnings North up in Teesside. Now, they're both organisations. There's different organisations to what they do, but all the organisations I'm involved in are somehow related to my own experiences. Because what's the point of... you wouldn't phone up a mechanic to fix your telly. Do you know what I mean? You'd get a TV repairman round. So I only use my lived experience where it's relevant. I've had a lot of suicidality throughout my life, suicidal ideation. And I use that experience as a lived experience influencer with the National Suicide Prevention Alliance. I mentioned the Samaritans. Samaritans have a lived experience panel where they share messages with us and we comment on those and do you think we should do this? Do you know what I mean? Surveys, things like that. This is what we're going to do for a media campaign. What wording sounds good to you? So all that sort of thing. But because of my work with the National Suicide Prevention Alliance and a charity called City Bridge Foundation, they're an organiser, the foundation. I think they were over 900 years old now. They look after London's bridges, basically. But they get a lot of money, so they use that money for good, and they do a lot of funding to charities and organisations in London. And we were working on their Make London More Livable fund, a £10 million suicide prevention fund. And because of the work that we've done on that, City Bridge nominated me for the Freedom of the City of London. Plus, I'm currently studying for a Master's in Applied Forensic Psychology as well. I'm doing a 2-year part-time course in that. And I'm my partner's full-time carer.
David, that is brilliant. By the way you speak about this, I can see you're so passionate. And
I love it.
Yeah.
Honestly, I love it. Why wouldn't I be? It saved my life.
Yeah.
Doing it in prison allowed me to survive prison. It didn't change my life in prison, but it allowed me to survive prison and kind of build. There's a theory called Broaden and Build theory by Fredrickson, a guy called Fredrickson. And it's all about positive psychology. And obviously it's about, like, for me, it all come from giving back. As I was giving back to people and other people in prison, I was giving back to those. I was learning more about myself. I started to understand myself a little bit more. And I was doing this before my diagnosis. I was doing this before I dealt with the trauma of sexual abuse. So after I started to, as I say, dealt with the trauma, after I was diagnosed and understood my diagnosis, and I was in a position to understand and utilise my diagnosis.
I just want to say you shouldn't have any of this self-doubt and this mask and all.
No, but I do.
I know you do, but you
show me someone that doesn't.
Yeah.
Deep down, show me that someone that's like, I can imagine old Bill. Who was it? Alex South, former prison officer. Alex South. She wrote a brilliant book. I can't get the name of it off the top of my head at the moment. I'm reading The Prison Counsellor at the moment by Sarah Temperton. But Alex South, former prison officer, she was talking about how a guy said to her about he couldn't get out of the car, couldn't move, couldn't go into work. And I'm sure that we all get that sometimes, that we can't physically move.
Anyway, David, I will leave links to all of your organisations below. There's a lot of them, so...
I know, it's but I hope you got enough, mate. I hope there's enough in there for you to get a decent podcast out.